Welcome back to the MMAOddsBreaker Fight Breakdown Show. This week, we're going to cover UFC back is finally in Japan. UFC Fight Night 75. Josh Barnett, Roy Nelson is the main event. It's September 26th in Saitama Super Arena in Saitama, Japan. The main event is kind of intriguing to me just because it's two big heavyweights, but both guys are trying to prove that they're still viable in the heavyweight division. But I actually like the co-main event of Gegard Mousasi versus Uriah Hall a lot better. So obviously, it's tradition. We'll go ahead with the co-main event first. Hall versus Mousasi. This one's a real tough fight for me to pick because both guys are so good on their feet. And honestly, Uriah Hall hasn't lived up to all the hype that he was supposed to be, when he first came into the UFC. So what's the line on this fight for right now, and how do you see it breaking down?
Right now, it's minus 470 for Mousasi, with the comeback being, checking the down best screen right now. Uriah Hall is plus 375 at 5 dimes. So a huge number. Betting has gone up a little bit. I opened it slightly lower. So most of the betting action is coming in on Mousasi as well. So it's kind of increased. I know there's a lot of people out there that looking at the line, they're saying, man, Uriah Hall is not getting much respect here. But at the same time, he's taken a huge step up in competition. Both guys are extremely talented. Like you said, I'm looking forward to this fight as well because I think for Mousasi, a big win here, an impressive win, obviously gets him right back in the mix for that title shot. And then for Hall, I mean, this is going to be the biggest scalp on his resume if he's able to get it, if he's able to pull off that upset. So great fight, really.
How do you see Hall winning this fight, being such a big underdog? How do you see him pulling a victory off?
It's going to be hard to finish Mousasi because, man, I mean, he's tough as nails, throughout his career. It's very difficult to get rid of that guy. I mean, it doesn't happen. So unless you're obviously somebody like Jacare or, have that kind of crazy skill. So I don't think he's going to knock him out. And I think Hall's best shot obviously is probably by decision or by knockout. If he hits the scorecards, if he can be competitive, I think maybe with the way judging is sometimes, he could steal a decision there. I think that's probably going to be his best way, but he's got to pick up his activity level and be able to throw a lot. And at times that's a problem with him as well. He gets a little bit tentative. So I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do that. So he always has a puncher's chance because, man, he's so strong and powerful and he's a good striker, but it's going to be hard to KO Mousasi. So I really think that Hall's best shot is honestly on the scorecards.
And Hall doesn't do very well when it comes to scorecards. The majority of his losses, of his 5 losses, have come via decision. He got knocked out one time, and then his other 4 losses are by a decision. He doesn't do very well when it gets to the end. Is it just because he's not as active coming later in the second and the third round? Is that why he's losing these decisions, or is it just because the guys he's facing and losing to are just that much more active?
No, it's a little bit of everything. I just don't get it sometimes. I mean, he does in spurts. He looks great. He does get a little bit tentative. He lets people control him up against the cage sometimes. He gets put on his back sometimes. So he makes some mistakes along the way that really cost him the fight. Now, there's also been some very close decisions, and some controversial decisions as well. That judging, it seems like there's always some kind of controversy anymore these days with judging. So, he's had some close calls that could have went his way possibly as well. So you got to factor that in. But yeah, I think it's his tentativeness. I think it's just not him stepping on the gas and keeping on that gas pedal, the whole time. And I think it just lets people get back in the fight. So in this spot against Mousasi, it's a difficult matchup because honestly, I think Mousasi is the better striker. I think Mousasi, even though Hall does come at you with a bunch of variety, and I just mentioned how powerful he is as well, but I do also think Mousasi can take the fight to the floor if he needs to. His wrestling has gotten a lot better. I mean, and Hall has been put on his back. So I think if things get a little bit tough for Mousasi, he's probably going to look to shoot and take Hall down. And then on the ground, Mousasi does have the advantage there as well.
Yeah, we saw that decisive advantage over Mark Munoz when Mousasi got on top of him. And that was the first time I really had to respect Mousasi's ground game. And now it's come apparent in almost every fight. If he doesn't want to be taken down, he doesn't stay down there. He has a really good job of getting back to his feet. But also, too, if he wants the fight to go to the ground, he's been finding a way to get to the ground and put him in a great position. I got to agree with the line on this one, and I do think it's a little overrated, but I still can't see myself putting any kind of money down on Hall, even though it's such a big gap. For you, the final bet, obviously you think Mousasi is going to win, but are you going to lay any money down on Hall at all?
Nah, it's too tough right now, honestly. I mean, if anything, there might be a little bit of value on Hall. But again, I just mentioned in the striking, it might be competitive, might be close, but I don't think he's going to get rid of him. And then if it hits the scorecards, I think Mousasi's going to out-wrestle him probably a little bit too. So probably not. This is not a dog or pass situation. I do see Mousasi winning, but the line is just getting a tad bit ridiculous, especially if Hall shows up and he does step on that gas pedal and he makes the fight interesting and he's able to keep off his back. Then we will see a close decision. So tempted on that big number, but sometimes it's better to be disciplined and just hold back.
Well, that's it for the co-main event. We're going to move on to the main event, Josh Barnett and Roy Nelson. This fight, obviously both guys trying to prove they still have it in the heavyweight division, trying to keep themselves in it. They're headlining a fight night card. Of course, it makes sense. Barnett is a huge draw still in Japan, doing a lot of New Japan wrestling and doing some other things over there too in between his fights. And then Roy Nelson actually has a pretty big following in Japan too. So it makes sense to have these two guys fight each other in Japan. I just don't know. I just don't think it's worthy of a Japanese card. Does that make sense? Because I remember I come around from the old school Pride days. We just saw, a huge event, happen off with another organization that kind of mimicked how Pride. Asai Gabara, the former owner of Pride that sold off to the UFC, is now back. He's getting ready to start a new venue. So for me, like looking at it when it goes to Japan, I want a Japanese style, kind of super hype, super pushed off an event. And this to me is just like another fight night the UFC has put together. It just happens to be in Japan. There's not been a lot of hype around it. There hasn't been a lot of push around it, even though both guys can talk trash pretty well. Both guys are extremely smart. It really hasn't been that much hit. Part of it's because of the Nick Diaz problem. The ban from the Nevada State Lead Commission is kind of taking some of the thunder away over this upcoming week, getting ready for this fight because everyone's focusing on that. But the reality of it is that this is still a very good heavyweight fight. For me, I can't pick. Just sitting at home on the couch, I can't figure out which one is going to be the favorite in this one. What's the line say?
Well, it's a decent line here as well. I mean, Barnett is getting a little bit more action, so it's been bet up as well. But it's minus 270 right now for Josh Barnett, and the comeback on Roy Nelson is sitting at plus 230 right now at 5 times. So steep line, somewhat. I mean, honestly, if you look at skill set for skill set, you know what? Roy Nelson's probably a little bit underrated because he is a very well-versed mixed martial artist. I mean, you talk about he has takedowns, he has wrestling, he has jiu-jitsu, but the thing is he doesn't use it as often as he really should. I mean, all we see him is throwing those hands, and he's got obviously huge knockout power. That's how he wins most of his fights. He's able to just, touch you and he knocks heavyweights out. That's how crazy powerful he is. But he has to get the job done usually in round one. If he goes beyond round one, things don't look that great for him. And if you look historically in the UFC, he hasn't had success getting a decision in the UFC. And how crazy is that? I mean, as many fights as he had, he doesn't win on the scorecards. So if this fight hits the scorecards, automatically the advantage goes to Josh Barnett because he is going to be the more active fighter. He's going to be able to control the pace of the fight and the tempo of the fight as well. So he does have several advantages in this fight. The stand-up game, I mean, it's basically Nelson has a puncher's chance in this fight is what it comes down to. I think Barnett is the more well-rounded martial artist, and he uses those skills a lot better. I mean, we see him subbing people. We see him knocking people out. He can win by decision as well. So he is the more complete martial artist that uses everything, all his tools. And Roy Nelson just kind of depends on that knockout. So it is possible, though. I mean, Nelson can knock anybody out, obviously, if he hits him flush. So Barnett has to be careful.
The thing I like about Josh Barnett is that he really is one of those athletes that has become a true martial artist. As he's gotten older, he's actually gotten a lot better, technically wise. Which is, of course, everyone says the same thing, I got better as I got older. But Josh actually looks to improve himself all the time. He uses his strengths always, but I think with Big Country, his ground game is his strongest suit. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu and a very athletic, a very dynamic, and has a very active guard from the bottom, but does not use it when he gets in the fights. He just does not use it when it comes in. So he stands up trying to be a heavyweight striker because he's got a big, strong head with that big beard. Kind of looks like he's not really getting touched that much, but he gets cracked a lot. And I think now with Barnett, I agree with you. Nelson's only got a puncher's chance, but I think now with Barnett, that if he hits Nelson just one time significantly hard enough, it's going to change the whole dynamic of the fight. If Nelson hits Barnett hard once, the only thing that Nelson can do is keep charging, where Barnett still can get it to the ground and has no problem on his back, but it's even more dangerous if he ends up on top, which is what happens lately with Nelson. He ends up on his back and doesn't do anything, but kind of survives the rounds over. For me, this one is Barnett. Really, it's got to be more along all the way when you look at a total MMA package. And I can't see putting any money down on Nelson because really, like in the co-main event, it's a one-puncher's chance to kind of put it out, and the other guy just has so much more overall that there's no way to kind of battle it. Is there any way I can put anything in a prop bet here? Because it looks like it's not even dog or pass. It's kind of pass on both. Is there a prop bet with anything we can do?
Yeah, well, it's tough. I mean, those out there that want to back Nelson, of course. I mean, if you're going to take Roy Nelson, take him by knockout. Don't go any other way because he's not going to win decision. So if you think that we're wrong and you think that there is value in Roy Nelson, then you'll get an even better price at knockout. So, I mean, that's how he wins the fight, basically. So there's a prop for those Nelson backers. But overall, I mean, there might be some value on that. But I think that Josh Barnett, it depends. Roy Nelson is a very hard guy to stop. But both these guys are getting a little bit older. I mean, we just recently seen Nelson get knocked out. So, I mean, maybe, his chin is getting a little bit more susceptible as well, because I was going to say take Barnett by decision because he's, I mean, Nelson is such a tough guy. It's typically hard to stop the guy. So you would think that he slows down enough round 2 and round 3 that Barnett just basically cruises to a decision. But I think as it goes in round 2 and round 3, Barnett's going to land a lot, like you said. And if he lands a lot, then he could possibly finish Roy Nelson as well. So that's the tricky thing, even about typically I would say bet Barnett by decision here, but you can't really have too much confidence in that either for that prop. So I think it's probably going to end inside. Granted, chin or not for Nelson in most cases. And Barnett, typically, I mean, he's been knocked out in the past before. And of course, he's coming off that, it was a pretty bad loss to Travis Brown. I mean, that has to stick in people's minds as well. Because before that point, I mean, Barnett was looking outstanding. Even though he has a ton of years behind him and a ton of experience, you would think in fight years, he's getting to that point where he's going to have a significant decline. I haven't really noticed it yet. I mean, the Travis Brown fight wasn't a good thing, obviously, but he's looked good up until that point. So for me, I do think this fight ends up ending inside, and it's probably going to be Barnett being the one that finishes.
Well, there you have it. There's another breakdown show here. UFC Fight Night 75. You got to watch it. It'll be on the Fox stations. And, of course, Fight Pass for the early events. But it's in Japan, so check your local listings because the time change is so crazy. Like, the fight's on Saturday, but it's like Friday night for us. It's kind of weird. So, pay attention to your local listings. But, Nick, another great job breaking down the fights. And, obviously, thanks so much for being on here. We'll talk to you guys next week here on the MMA Oddsbreaker Fight Breakdown Show.